Welcome to the Heartwork podcast, where we delve into stories, struggles, and triumphs of entrepreneurship, leadership, and personal growth. I'm Dr. Sarah.
And I'm Dr. Marisa. We're here to guide practitioners, entrepreneurs, leaders, and those just navigating the complexities of life on a journey of discovery that explores the dance between passion and strategy, heart and hustle.
With candid conversations, insightful interviews, and plenty of laughs, get ready to uncover how leading with heart can transform your business and life. Let's dive in.
Welcome back to another episode of the Heartwork podcast. Today is very exciting because we have Justin Freishtat on with us. He is a fund manager and entrepreneur. And when anyone recovers from a 12.7 million loss to just keep building, forging ahead with grit, we definitely want to know what's really going on in their mind and heart and how they can continue to press on each day. So today's guest, Justin, turned a 11-month meteoric rise into a very powerful story of resilience. So let's dive right on in. So Justin, welcome on. Thank you so much for joining us. So, oh my gosh, 12.7 stolen. Like, that's not just a number. That comes along with, well, it can come along as like a trauma, and PTSD and working with money. So walk us through that day when you really realized what's happening and what was that first thought that hit you? What was going on in your mind that you haven't shared with anyone until this moment?
Yeah, it was definitely the most traumatic thing I've ever been through for a number of reasons. And you know how they say things come in threes? It wasn't just that one thing. I had arguably the worst losses and hardest gut punches leading up to that in the same 2-month span. We're talking, you lose your business. That's the 12.7. We'll get into that. But my little brother got cancer and my dog of 12 years dies all within this tight period. So it was like feeling like what else could happen, and just destroys you mentally.
Wow.
Heart hurts, everything hurts, Yeah. Especially if you've never been through anything like that before. I've been fortunate enough that nobody really close to me has ever gotten cancer, passed away, things like that. So yeah, it was very sobering, and all you could really do was kind of look in the mirror and just know that it's just you versus you, and you got to talk yourself through it and decide in those moments, who you're going to be on the other side of this. And I think I had good perspective on that in terms of that, okay, here's where your back's against the wall. You knew it would probably happen at some point in your life. And that's when you really find out who you are.
Oh, 100%. Do you feel like, were there times that led, like, how did you build that muscle and saying, like, I know I'm going to be okay. My back's against the wall. Like, because you mentioned this was going to happen at some point. So were there things that had been going on in life leading up to that point where you're like kind of waiting for the shoe to drop? And so you've built that grit and capacity? Or was this kind of a pivotal moment where you're like, I either got to turn and make it or like put my hands up in the air and say, I'm done?
It was very interesting because from my upbringing, I watched my dad build businesses and then big reversals. He got, hit the same way I did in that moment. And my whole development in the first business and all the books I was reading, I wanted to prepare myself and educate myself so that would never happen to me. So if I'm being completely transparent, when it did happen anyways, it was like my whole life's mission kind of failed in terms of I was going to be the indestructible one. I was going to be the one that never has the big financial reversal. I'm going to be the one that never puts my family through that pain. All those things that my childhood kind of shaped me, it happened anyways. And then, on the other side of it, it's like anybody more successful than me has been through something worse. So you start to put it into perspective and you just get through it. But yeah, it was really hard on a day-to-day basis. I mean, all the things when you're developing a business, having call reluctance, like I don't want to call the leads, or I'm scared to knock on the door. All these good problems in business all of a sudden just became like a gift. Like I want those hardships again.
Right.
So very, very mind twisting to go through something that's actually really hard.
I can't even fathom losing $12.7 million. So that is that's just, to me, is like a mind blowing, a huge amount of money. That's just like, how do you even hold on to that? You know what I mean? Like, is that your whole livelihood? It's like in my head, I'm like, how do you even turn that around? Like, what was that shift where you all of a sudden go from, okay, this is a huge amount of money, but now all of a sudden, like, I have to actually do something to actually see this move and recreate something. What was that like?
It was survival, because whether this makes sense or not, the money was actually not what I was most concerned about. I had brought in 47 other human beings that trusted me with their money into that fund. And all that I cared about was fighting for those people and making it right with them. That was the hardest part. I had friends, family. My dad gave me money. Like, that was really hard to lose my dad's money after trying to spend my whole life to never do something like that.
Right.
So when that happened, it was, basically what happened was, just to give you context, we had money in a brokerage. We were trading, and it would be kind of like for people that do real estate, everybody that's bought a house, you send your money, you wire it to a title company, and then you close on the house, and it sits in that escrow at title until, the mortgage company or whoever gets the money. Well, imagine you wire the money to the title company and the guy who owns it decides he's stealing it. Like, that's essentially what happened. A brokerage that held the capital, it just vanished. So when our wires didn't show up in July of 23, we couldn't pay our investors. So we get on the phone with our fund counsel. I'm like, what do we do? Like, what's the game plan? You got to walk us through this. None of us had ever been through something like this. And then you just start executing. Here's the list of investors. You got to call. The hardest thing I've ever done in my life was call every single person and deliver that news. Mm. Took 2 weeks, because each call is going to be 30 to 60 minutes, 60 investors total, and 47 of them I brought in personally. So it was just brutal, phone call after phone call, a lot of crying on a loop,
I bet.
And but every day I would just look in the mirror and be like, it would be very easy to just send everyone a K1 for their losses, write it off on your taxes. It didn't work out, and we move on with our lives. And that's not what we did. We immediately filed lawsuits, which have all concluded. We sued 6 people and entities, and we won or settled with every single one of them.
That's amazing.
Yeah, two years later, coming out of this with $114 million judgment from a court. And I always knew going through it in every moment, I was like, someday you're going to judge yourself by how you showed up through this process. And I'm very proud of how my partners and I handled it.
Yeah, that's incredible. I mean, to be able to turn that around. And when we were talking before recording, you have spoken about serving before selling. And when you attract in the right people, when you operate that way, there is much more of a heart-centered philosophy. And so expand on that, and how that heart-centered philosophy and calling those investors personally, the ones that you had brought on, really helped you move forward significantly in that short term where everything felt chaotic, but clearly paid off in such a positive way that was much more transcending than just $12.7 million to have a over $100 million settlement, like a way that you could not have expected coming back in fruitfulness. So talk to us about having those people on your team that were also interested in making sure to serve not only your business, the reputation, but also the investors and the, like you said, not only monetary investment, but also the belief and the philosophy and the encouragement, even when it comes to something as hard as having family be tied into that, right? So it's personal too, on that sense.
Yeah, it's extremely difficult to be there for these people that are going through something when in reality, what we were going through was 10 times worse, right? Mm. It's one thing to lose your money in an investment. It's another thing to lose all of your income and your investment. And now you have to work full time for free on something, well, everybody else still goes and does their job in their daily life. Sure, you got a big investment loss, but it was nothing like what we had to go through, right? And you're signing up to, lawsuits are expensive. So now my income goes to zero. I've got to put a ton of time and effort into something, figure out how I'm going to manage my life. We had to move out of our house. We had to sell some cars. Like it was horrible for my wife, to go through that. The shame, the embarrassment, all these things that you go through, and then getting on phone calls. And, some of these investors were great about it. Some of them were completely crippled by it. And I had to just keep the frame of professionalism and serve them even when I couldn't even really serve myself. So in a weird way, that's what kind of got me through it, was just if I can keep showing up, for them, I'll be okay eventually. Because we're talking all my relationships that I had built for 15 years, most of them were involved in that. So now it's like you've lost your network. It's hard to explain unless you've been through it. But the only things that I focused on were what I could control, how I showed up for those people, still going to the gym, still meal prepping my food, taking care of my health. Like, my mental health was destroyed. And I've done a lot of testing and neurotransmitter testing, and I can see the trauma in those results and everything. But physically, I still held myself together. I knew that if I couldn't do that, I would probably spiral and completely fall apart.
Oh yeah, we definitely know that like the body keeps the score, right? And it is true. Sometimes we can be, we just recorded an episode on this, like so focused in on everything that we have to do that we do forget to take care of ourselves first. But if we're not doing those things to serve ourselves, we can't then show up as our best to help serve others. And that's a big thing to go through. And like you said, there are relationships that are not only involved in that, but at stake, but like your wife by your side. What was the relationship that maybe took the biggest hit, or that you had to also focus on walking through as you're also managing this huge life change and transition?
Definitely the marriage is the hardest part when you're going through something like that, especially because, we had just moved to Vegas. I mean, we'd been there for a month, right? In our, dream house. Like, we had exited our previous business. Her telework got approved. She had her own career. But we had just made a ton of money, and the hedge fund was taking off, and she didn't really need to work anymore. So 2 weeks before we moved to Vegas, they pull her telework agreement. They're like, everybody back in the office. And it's like, well, we're going. So she left her career, and then 2 months later, mine fell apart. So we were both sitting there with no careers, no income. So yeah, I mean, she was pissed at me. It was a lot to go through all at the same time. I mean, her losing her dog was like worse than losing.
Yeah, it's so hard. What was the time frame of all this, once all this happened, to when you started to see things start to really take a turn and a shift?
While we were driving across the country, that's when I got the call from my brother, 28 years old. I have leukemia. It's like,
wow,
worst call you could ever get. And then, so how are you supposed to enjoy the beautiful view in the house that you worked your whole life for? So that was hard enough to begin with. And then, your dog starts having seizures out of nowhere. And it turns out he's got cancer too. And he's been with us for 11 years. Like, when I met my wife, the dog was 1, and it was her baby. So it was like everything that was our identity was like all dying at the same time. And then the business, when that fell apart, that was like, man, I guess there's nothing left. It's like, what other shoe can drop here? So in a way, it's all about how you talk to yourself. I'm like, all right, so, if you've done something once, you can do it again. You'll get through it. You can either be the victim, the victor, but like on a day-to-day basis, hour to hour, minute to minute, you are in a mental battle with survival.
Absolutely. It's a fight, and it's a fight interpersonally. It's a fight with those other people in those relationships. It's a fight and a battle to forge forward. Like, what keeps you in that, when an easier path would be, say, maybe not to involve everyone else and just kind of go through things quietly and hand them the K1 and just write it off? What did moving forward and going through with the lawsuit like represent for you beyond the money and the reputation and bringing things forward?
Probably goes back to the early days of building skills and capacity in business, start knocking doors and having these aggressive goals. And, first time you make like 50 grand in a year and you can pay your own rent, you don't need your parents anymore. It's like the greatest feeling in the world. And then, different breakpoints of success, the happiness is just diminished. So, I was pounding like door-to-door sales, and I would work 90 days straight, no days off, chasing records, building capacity. So I just think that going through good stress earlier in my career, without that, there's no way I would have been able to get through a stress like that at a way higher level. Because now you're thinking about all kinds of things, right? I know we didn't do anything wrong. Like, we did everything by the book compliantly, but this is bad. It's, it's probably fraud. And now I'm involved in it. Now my reputation's ruined. Like, all these things that go through your head. The reality is none of it's true. On the other side of it, you're very grateful for going through your biggest struggles.
Did you do anything, or would you say that you've done anything different on this like rebirth when you kind of talked about like it all died? You couldn't have had anything else like go wrong, quote unquote. Like some of the hardest things you ever went through. Do you feel like you got to see how you rebuilt something differently than how you did it the first time? Were there any things that you like laid to the side, like any parts of your ego, any parts of your pride, any parts of yourself that you're like, this didn't serve me here well before, and this is what I'm going to move into? Yes, obviously we have lots of the beautiful aspect of, like you said, just skills and the resilience and the grit that from some of that from the past. But was there a part of it that was just like, man, this freaking did not serve me, and this is partly why some of this, even just more for yourself, that maybe this is why this was here, and I didn't want this to move into what that rebirth looked like for you?
Yeah, the interesting thing about, I had pretty much had nothing but winning in my career until that moment. When you go backwards and you fall off a mountaintop, it's very hard to get back in the grind of building from a lower place when you feel like you should be here. So what came out of that was, the day-to-day chase of the next level was kind of, now it was so far out of reach to get back to where I was that I didn't put so much stress on the outcomes in the timeline of the rebuild. So I think when you operate that way, you're a lot happier in your day-to-day of whatever you're doing, if you're not so focused on charging forward to hit a goal or a target. That's why I've really changed the way I think about goal setting and that environment. I actually probably tell you something different than every other, guru about goals.
Let's hear it.
Yeah, tell us.
Well, I just, every time I've set big goals, you're living in the future. You're so focused on something that you miss the whole ride. So now, yeah, I got my dreams, and I do believe that your potential ends at the distance you can dream, but that's not what you should focus on a day-to-day basis. Now, I just can only control my next 24 hours. It's the only thing I think about. I just figure out what I need to do to move the initiative forward every day. And then the outcomes will happen on God's time. And if you can get into that mindset, all the stress of where you are, your losses, your wins, you're not even focused on that anymore. You're actually in the day-to-day process and enjoying the build.
Amen. Sometimes we focus so much on the particular outcome or the particular goal. And if it doesn't happen in that certain time frame, if it doesn't happen by that date, a lot of failure identity can be wrapped up in that productivity desire, compared to having like objectives and breaking it down to, like you said, the things that you actually have control over that can move the needle right now. And a lot of people might focus on the bigger picture of that goal and objective, but forget to take the micro steps along the way and celebrate the movements that happen as a result. And if we focus so much on the actual outcome versus focusing on the dream of what that outcome represents, right? The why compared to the how ends up happening because of the way you move through the day to day. It's the why that keeps you motivated enough to get there. And it doesn't force you to feel attached so much to a timeline around it, but to just trusting and having the faith that it's going to show up. And it might show up differently than you expect, but it ends up being there, and sometimes more beautifully than we could have ever dreamed or imagined that it would.
I love that, because it's kind of like saying, I want to be a millionaire by this age. Okay, so if you get there and you're not, you're depressed. Instead of just saying, I want to be a millionaire and it'll happen when it happens. Like, it's actually, as long as you don't lie to yourself to not do the work, that's a different discussion.
Right. Absolutely. Talk to us too about like transitioning from starting a business and being kind of on the ground floor in the grind to then getting into more of a leadership role and being responsible for other people in your business, and what part of yourself really needed to grow or move through to be able to let go of ego, to then not be the one on the floor, but to help encourage other people to do the work so that you can more focus on the big picture and the business and the objectives that come down the line with where you were going.
I always felt that I would have to do the thing before I was qualified to help other people do the thing. So I didn't start recruiting sales teams until I had already broken all the industry records in the first industry I was in. At that point, I couldn't work any harder. I've maxed out capacity and maxed out income. At that point, the only way to, grow is through leverage, other people. So that's when I started building teams, bringing in other salespeople. And then the most rewarding thing in business is to be able to transfer your subject matter expertise into someone else and then watch them succeed. So
true.
That was a beautiful transition. Very difficult for me. Definitely not a natural leader. I'm more of the do my own thing, lone wolf warrior. Very dangerous, very quiet and introverted, but put up crazy results. That's my natural, I guess, identity. But the growth it had to happen for growth. And I never thought I'd be the person that's speaking on stages, doing podcasts, being a leader, front forward person. But that happens through the natural evolution of just not allowing yourself to be the big fish in the small pond. It's like once you max out your capacity, it's very difficult to say, okay, I'm going to go to zero and go into something else. But that's how you grow and get to places that most people can't even really fathom.
Absolutely. Were there moments where you got around bigger people doing bigger things that made you feel like that small fish? How do you move through that? How do you like to surround yourself with others to help initiate and motivate that growth?
This is the hardest dynamic. It's probably the number one thing that holds people back. You are never going to feel qualified to be in the room, the next room, or the next thing until you go do it. So I think it's the mental fortitude to say, I'm just going to do it anyways. And that's it. Those moments of, it's terrifying to, go into a room full of billionaires and, stuff like that have happened over the years. And then once you just make yourself do these things, you start to realize that these people are just the same as you. They had just done that exact thing more times than you, and they've all failed forward, and nobody judges you ahead of you in the food chain. So what are you scared of anyways?
That's good. I think that's what I've noticed when I put myself in rooms with people, especially if it's rooms of people that are really like celebrating. They want to like bring the next like generation up, essentially. It's like it only allows for more light to happen. It only allows for more opportunity. You just never know who you're going to come in contact with. May not always be comfortable, but at the same time, it really is one of the greatest gifts, I think, that putting yourself into a space that is out of your comfort zone, but it's going to put you in line with people that you just never know where that connection is going to go. And it will literally light something else up, which is super cool.
Run towards the fear and then just call it excitement, right? That's one of the things I had to learn is what the feelings that you're feeling and how your chemistry works in your brain and everything. You get to decide what the feeling is. So it can be anxiety, it can be fear, or it's excitement and a sign of the right direction.
Right. What is so like you've talked about, obviously, and you deal with a lot of money on any given basis that's bigger than some people even probably are listening to on this podcast today. But I've heard this from other people. And would you say this would be true that when you hit when you go from 6 figures to 7 to 8 to 9, like in your rooms with billionaires, is there a common theme of insecurity that keeps you from going to that next level? What's one of the biggest things that's blocking people from going to that next space?
Oh man, that's a hard one to unpack, but I think it's the self-awareness to understand who you are and where you want to go and what the best path is for you to get there. There's a lot of people that want to be the guy or the girl. They want to have their name on the door and they're fighting to start their own business when really they had a skill set they could have attached to somebody who had already done it at a high level and they would actually go further, farther, faster. So I think, for me, that's probably one of my greatest skill sets is I literally have zero ego. I just want to win, however that happens. So it's kind of like, okay, do I want to spend the next 20 years figuring it out and then maybe I'll be a billionaire, or do I just want to go work for one,
Sure.
and just, get pulled along faster? It's like, do you want to be the third or fourth person at a publicly traded company that makes $10 million a year? Or do you want to be the small business owner that's, struggling to get profitability, but you got a business and your name's on the door? So, I think you put all that all into perspective and the path will be revealed to you.
What was one of the things that you had to personally work through, if you don't mind being transparent? And if you did, some of that ego, like you said, I don't have an ego, but obviously we all have stuff that we can kind of come up and it can bring to the surface and stuff. Was there ever anything that you felt really, you ran up against a wall when you were going to those next levels, or when you were working for those people that were really calling those things out of you?
I hit that wall every day. Yeah. And it's the same wall. It's the opposite of ego. It's feeling like you're not worthy. Right. And I don't know where I heard it, but that's a key indicator of really successful people is they never feel like they're worthy and satisfied, and they need to do more. They need something to prove to the world or something. I don't know. It's a dynamic because I don't feel any different at every break point. Making six figures for the first time. Cool. What's the next level? And it's like there's always a complex to you when you're driven like that. And I've been trying to break that down and figure it out because I think we're all searching for being able to be content in our daily lives. And you think that you get all the money in the world and that's going to happen. It's just not true. It just reveals the next set of problems or challenges that you need to work on. So for me, it's just when I am in a conversation or a room, like last night, I was in a room in Vegas. I don't know, the net worth was in stupid billions. And, you had to apply to be there. If you don't have $1 million plus business, you can't even get in the party. And, you're introducing yourself to people and it's high level conversations, and it's hard to feel worthy of being in rooms like that.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think what you talked a lot about, it's like if you're losing millions of dollars, sure, in that sense, but then also have had to navigate major sickness with a major loved one and a death of somebody, obviously, that's very close to you when it comes to, I mean, I have my animals are my babies as well. I can't imagine when I have one that's 14 and I'm like, I don't even want to think about it, that type of a thing. So I can't imagine just the rhythm of like having to let some of that and like having to work through that along with then just your day to day when you're stepping into rooms with people that are just human as well, they've had to deal with their own stuff and had to navigate that, and to be able to, yes, say that I am worth it. I've had to navigate these big things, but that worth goes so much more than just like the dollars that you've either built or you've lost at the same time.
Yeah. I just thought of something. So I think it's a good correlation. The first is the worst. So if you've never been through it, that's how I look at it now. Is it the first time that I'm going through this or doing this thing? Because the emotions attached to have never done it are way more difficult to deal with than if you've been through it before, right? So the next time, my new dogs, when one of them passes, I'm going to be prepared for that situation. I had never been through it before.
Sure.
So it's so hard, but now it's like, it won't be as hard next time. It has nothing to do with how much I love the dog. It's just going to be, okay, I've been through this. I know how to get through it. It's a little bit more familiar. I think it's the same thing in business. So, if I ever have a big loss again, it will not cause the same destruction to me as a human being as the first time.
Sure.
So chase the first, I guess,
Yeah. And again, failures or lessons can really teach us a lot, sometimes in the lowest points, just as much as the successes can bring new levels of challenges and new objectives and desires for our life. And sometimes it is those moments where we're at our lowest that we really find out who we are, what we identify with, what our greatest core values are, and the way we truly define success. And then building upon that into that next high note takes us on the mountain in a much more productive and heart-led way, for sure. So what would you say, in your own words, is like your true metric of success? You lay your head on the pillow each night and said, today was a great day.
Man, that's another one I'm still figuring out, but
aren't we all?
Yeah. I mean, it's really just, did I control what I can control today? That's pretty much it. And sometimes what I've had to learn too is, have a lazy day, be intentional about it and be unapologetic about it. That was the hardest thing for me, looking at blood work and, I'm really deep in all the biohacking stuff, and my cortisol levels were like so high off the charts, and I would still be like, no, I need to go to the gym again. And even though I've been 10 days in a row, it's like, bro, like rest. It's okay. So I think, especially earlier on in my career, it's like, I can't take a day off. Like, I got to hit these goals, been getting back to these stupid goals. Now looking back, it's like, if I had just taken the day to rest or, actually go hang out with some friends that I haven't seen in a while, probably would have been better for my soul. And it would have been totally fine if I didn't get any commission that day.
Mm-hmm. I love when you say, like, for me, I hear it this way, but when you say control what you can control, I hear it as be present with what you can be present with, and be present with what you're right in front of. And I understand what you're saying, but it's like that place of like, when we are so, you could do the things, all you can do is show up to be the best version of yourself with what is right in front of you. And that may be going to the gym in that moment because that's what's going to give you the most joy. That may be getting on a phone call and talking to somebody that's going to make you more money or whatever that may be in that moment too. And so it's like being present with what is right in front of you that is going to only continue to add to the value of your day and the value of your life in that moment.
Absolutely. Awesome. Well, Justin, if people want to continue to get in touch with you, what are ways that they can connect with you?
So I'm easy to find. There's only one of me in the world with a last name like this. So yeah, social media, I'm on all of them. So at Justin Freishtat, easiest way to get in touch with me, whichever one's your favorite. IG is my biggest presence, so you'll get a hold of me quickly there.
Do you have anything happening right now that our people would like to know about, to be excited about, to want to connect with you at that level? What would they love to hear more about from you?
Yeah, so for accredited investors, always want to meet with you. That's what we do. So we help accredited investors get into private placement deals, and we do everything from big unicorn, billion-dollar company investments all the way down to startup. But the thing I'm most excited for this year, got my first chance to ring the bell on the New York Stock Exchange with a company called Healthcare Integrated Technologies. So you can go buy the stock. Right now we're over the counter on the pink sheets, but we should be uplisting later this year. So definitely tell your friends, family, everybody buy HITC is the ticker symbol.
That's cool.
Awesome.
That's actually based out of Knoxville, correct? Fun little thing.
Right. Yeah.
Yep. Awesome. Well, we'll definitely add all of that to the show notes so that our people can definitely reach out and continue to go that. Congratulations. That's really exciting.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today. Do you have anything else you'd like to add? Any last little moments before we close this up?
I think what I've learned through all these massive ups and downs is just that life's not nearly as serious as, we think on a day-to-day basis. So, mental health and everything, the world has just kind of gotten, I don't know, it's kind of depressing. And I think we just need to start to realize that in 100 years, none of us are going to be here. No one's going to remember us. And it's just not that serious. So, if something is calling your name or it's eating away at you, handle it, take care of it. Don't be scared to, do uncomfortable things. On the other side of it is a better place for you.
Faith over fear.
Mm-hmm. I love that because it gives so much permission to be able to be yourself and show up for yourself as well. And life is too short not to freaking live freely and just enjoy it and run with it and have a freaking effing time, right?
Absolutely.
What also really helped me with that is once I realized that, everybody talks about being, scared of what other people think about them. What I realized is that I was never scared of what people thought about me. That was all my ego thinking that people didn't think about me at all.
Right.
So if you're in that mental mode, you need to check your ego, and that will free you to go, do the ththings that you're scared of, because it's just you versus you.
Well, I really appreciate your honesty because, again, I think so many times people, especially depending on where you are, whether it's whatever layer of wealth that you have, right? But it's so easy to look at somebody that's been, like you said, in those rooms that you're just a fake robotic human that just has no feelings and never been through anything, So I appreciate your transparency and honesty when it comes to just being yourself and showing up and saying like, man, I've had to really struggle with the worth too, and struggle and just want to know that this life has more to it than just like making the buck. Obviously, that's part of what we get to do. We get to live life to the fullest, so I appreciate that, and we are very grateful that you were here. So thank you, everybody, for listening today. If you guys liked what you heard, please rate the show, share this, obviously connect with Justin on Instagram. We'll put all the information there, and we look forward to seeing you guys next time.